All right, what's up, guys? In this video, we're going to be covering base cooling, specifically focused on creating Steam Turbine and Aquatuner cooling loops. This video is coming at the request of a viewer who had mentioned that creating these loops is a bit of a pain. And I tend to agree that there is so many people that are not necessarily comfortable with these setups, which can really hurt their progress trying to move into mid and late game. And basically, until you're comfortable with putting these things together, your oxygen not included life is can be overly difficult than it needs to be. I know for a long time I played this game and I didn't mess with these cooling loops. I would try to route my heating through cold biomes and piping, and I would do all sorts of weird, crazy stuff. But once you get this cooling loop down, or this basic cooling setup down, the world is your oyster. You're going to be able to apply this to basically everything in the game, whether it's for food cooling, if you want to tame volcanoes, anything that you really want to do. So this is like a really important thing that you need to know. So for this video, there's going to be a lot of talking. And I think the way that I'm going to handle this is, first, I'm going to go over and explain my current base cooling loop that I have set up in my beautiful Utopia, which I've haven't had a time to really play lately, between making videos and whatnot. I spend all my time recording videos, but I never actually get to play. So after we go over all of this, I'm going to jump into a sandbox, and I'm basically going to repeat and reiterate everything with the different visuals and kind of showing it going together for those that want to, hear it all over and see it, presented in a different way. I'm not going to cover, stuff like, different, unique other ways of cooling bases. I'm going to really focus on basic cooling using the traditional steam turbine and Aquatuner setup. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing that is important to know when it comes to any sort of cooling in oxygen not included is that heat has to be deleted. It has to go somewhere, right? So when you think of cooling, you have to think of cooling as deleting heat that's already been created, or getting rid of it. Now, I want to give a quick honorable mention to two things, and one of them is deleting heat in plants that will accept it, because you can feed hot water to a plant, and if that plant is happy with taking that hot water, that is a form of deleting the temperature. And another way that is actually fairly simple that a lot of people don't think about is you send it to outer space, because anything that you send up into the void just disappears forever. And so you can use a gas if you want it, or you could use liquid even if you want. And you can just pipe it off into La La Land, and it'll come up in here and it just goes away. And if I remember, I'll show a little bit of that more in the Sandbox game. I don't want to enable Sandbox or dev tools for this map because I'm playing the map and I don't want to ruin it for myself. So I'm avoiding, messing with it from that fashion. So we'll save that for after. When it comes to the steam turbine, I think there's the first thing that people have issues with is getting steel. This item you really want to be made out of steel. Now, you can make them out of, you could make them in theory out of any of the applicable materials, but steel is the set it and forget it. And at the end of the day, if it's not steel, just know that you're probably going to have to mess with it again later. If you click on things, maybe you didn't know, but you can come over to the properties and you can actually queue them to have their material change. So you can actually change the material that they're made out of. and the dupe will come and order a rebuild, and they'll change the material that it's made out of. Anyways, the reason obviously that we use steel is because it has a super high overheating temperature of plus 200, which basically means that this won't overheat. And the reason it's not going to overheat is because Steam Turbine deletes the steam at 125. But yeah, so the point is that you're deleting it if it gets over 125. So this thing will never hit its overheating temperature because it's made out of something that already can handle 200. And then actually, if you look at it, you can see quite clearly here that the base temperature value for overheating is 125. And that's why, you know, it can overheat if you make it out of something else. Now, obviously, you can make it out of gold, which is easier to access. But the problem is that as it runs, with gold, it will still generally get to that point because the gold gives you a plus 50 to play with. But if this thing is running like non-stop, and which they tend to do at the beginning when you put them down, because it has kind of that initial cooling cycle, right? So once everything's kind of cool, it's easy for it to maintain it. But at the very beginning, you know, everything's hot, and so it has to run like on overdrive for a long time until it gets everything set to the temperature that it wants to be. Anyhow, so that goes with that. So you want to make the stuff in here out of stuff that's not going to melt. Now, this sensor, I made this out of steel. I made everything out of steel. It's not necessary. You know, you just check to see whatever you're putting in, if it's going to melt. And if they don't have some sort of overheating temperature, then you don't need to build it out of steel. You basically build it out of whatever you like. Now, the steam turbines, so these are a little bit different. So again, I built it out of steel. I had a lot of steel at the time. And, you know, somebody had mentioned to me in the comments, and they said, you know, you never need to build this thing out of steel because this thing, in theory, will never overheat. And it's a very good point, right? It doesn't overheat. The only issue when it comes to the steam turbine is that it will not operate when it gets too hot, but it won't necessarily break, right? So you can see here it overheats at 1200, so it's a non-issue. So you build this out of whatever you like. Regarding the temperature that it will run at, which I believe, I want to be able to show it. All right, well, I can't figure out where it's written, but if I recall, I think it's 100 degrees. So basically, the turbine itself won't run if the body or the temperature of the building exceeds 100 degrees. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but that's what I believe it is. Anyways, I can't see where it's written. At the end of the day, all you need to know is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be built out of steel or anything special. If it overheats, it'll just stop running. And we basically, so what we do to keep it cool is we use the cooling loop that you're creating with the Aquatuner, and you're just going to use that same cooling to keep that building cool. So you won't have to worry about that. The other thing you need to know, obviously, I'm not sure if I just mentioned it, but is that the steam needs to be 125 for it to cook. I think it will go up to 200. I don't know if it'll just go up forever, but anyways, 125. That's what you're looking for. All right, moving on. So we'll start with sourcing steel. So sourcing steel tends to be kind of the hiccup, and it doesn't need to be. It's actually quite easy. You just have to kind of like get it through your head as to the process that needs to happen, right? So steel has to be built from the metal refinery. Prior to that, you have the rock crusher, right? Before you'll research to get to the metal refinery. And the metal refinery, to build the steel, you need iron, refined carbon, and lime. Refined carbon is simply made in the kiln. You come over here, and this just uses coal. So it's just like an additional process, but if you have coal and a kiln, you can make it. Iron ore to iron, again, very simple, built at the rock crusher. And the other one was lime, and then lime again. You can basically just come down here, and you can get it from anywhere. So anytime you're cracking eggs at the egg crackers for your food, or the poke shell molts, which are these little creatures here, you can crush all that to lime. So that's pretty straightforward. The other thing that you'll see is that it'll tell you that the refinery's input, they need like a liquid to intake for cooling, but it doesn't matter You know, if you're using liquid that's already hot, you know, throw whatever you want, like, you know, water, polluted water, whatever, and just throw something in there and you can just spit it right back out. Because at the very beginning, it doesn't matter if you use this and you create a little bit of extra hot water that comes out of it, right? So, you know, you can throw hot water in it and then you can just throw hot water back down. You can just throw it into, you know, the pit of eternity, or you can send it out. Pit of eternity, I don't know what that means. Or you can send it to outer space. You can just dump it on the ground. You're going to create a little bit of heat, but you won't be doing that for very long. You just are trying to get enough steel up to start your first loop. Right now, I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. So you do need plastic to build the steam turbines. So we clicky here and you see selected plastics and your metal. So let's talk quickly about getting your plastic. So plastic comes from this polymer press, which you may or may not know. And then that gets researched. I've learned to write the words in here so that you guys don't have to watch me struggle like an illiterate trying to find it. So it's right here. Not a big deal. You can see it. Early game tech for the most part. No crazy research required. So you get the plastic, and the plastic needs petroleum, right? And we're getting carbon dioxide and steam coming off it, but that's not really relevant to the point of setting it up, right? We're not talking about, you know, making plastic production. We're talking just, you only need a little bit, right? So basically you need like a couple runs of this. Does it say the actual output of plastic? I'm sure it does somewhere. Am I blind here? Regardless, you only need a little bit. You need like 300, right? So you don't need to set this plastic production setup somewhere permanent. You could set it up anywhere on the fly, and it doesn't matter if it creates a little bit of extra heat. Oh no, you only need 200, even less. You don't need to worry about where it is, or, you know, the temperatures, or the fact that it's producing carbon dioxide, because even if you leak a little bit of carbon dioxide or steam or whatever, it doesn't matter. Right? It really doesn't matter. You're just going to set it up for a quick run. And like I was talking about with the refinery, just enough to get yourself your first cooling loop going. Once you have your first cooling loop and you've sustained, you know, your food and all that stuff we talked about, you know, that's all that matters. Anyways, so you need petroleum. The petroleum is coming out of your refinery. So you're just doing oil into the refinery, and then the refinery into your polymer press. Super, you know, non-complicated. Sometimes it feels like it's a big undertaking, but it's not. You know, a lot of times you're like, okay, yes, well, I got to dig down and find oil, or, you know, do whatever. But there's actually a lot of different ways that you can do this that you may not think about. For example, if you could find petroleum, you don't even need to come down here. I think when I did it initially, I used slicksters. And was it slicksters? Can't remember. I had gotten, no, hold on a second. What's going on here? They're long-haired. It wasn't long-haired. Can't remember. Anyhow, maybe that wasn't what I did. I could have swore that I was making oil in here. I thought I had slicksters. I had something eating carbon dioxide. I was getting oil. Anyways. But beyond that, what I'm trying to say is that you can get oil and petroleum from other ways. And even if you don't want to run down here, you could like bust into this and literally just leak some on the ground and then have them mop it up, right? You could have them mop it up, and then you could have them bring the bottles up. You don't have to run pipes. You don't have to do all sorts of crazy stuff. There's a million and one ways to get access to it. Oh no, it was here I had this set up. I think I came down, I just dug a little shaft. I came here and I had run a pump, and then I made a little, I dropped a refinery and a press right here, and I just pumped it in here. I spit out a couple sticks of plastic, and then I deleted it and I went back up. But there's a lot of different ways. So don't get hung up on making plastic. It's only a little bit. There's different ways to get it. I thought there was things that you could erase too that would give you plastic, but I can't remember if that's a thing or not. But I could have swore there was different buildings that gave you plastic if you deleted them. or demolish them. But yeah, you need a little bit of plastic. It's not hard to get. So you get yourself 200 of those and you're off to the races. Anyways, moving on. So we come back to here and we look at how our Aquatuner works. So Aquatuner basically reduces the temperature of whatever liquid you put into it by 14 degrees, right? So you could use, basically any liquid, but every liquid has its pros and cons regarding how it responds to cooling, right? So we use water, for instance. If you were to take the pipe that's going through the Aquatuner, which would be this one right here, and you were to fill it with water, you would have to deal with, the traits that water has. So, and the two big things that you want to look at are freezing point, heat capacity, and heat conductivity. So freezing, pretty straightforward. Evaporation, I guess, to an extent, if it's too hot, but that shouldn't be an issue when you're dealing with cooling loops, of course. But the freezing point is important because if you put, let's say, water and you're trying to cool it, and if you accidentally make it go below 0, your pipes are going to freeze and they're going to burst. And that's particularly an issue if it bursts inside a chamber that has been closed that you can't get back into because, you've vacuumed it all out and you've sealed it. The next two big things that we're looking at are how much heat can it hold and how willing is it to, change the heat temperature, right? So basically you want something that's going to hold as much heat as possible and is going to pick it up as easiest as possible. So I'm trying to think of an example in real life. Sorry, I got allergies this morning, so I'm having a hard time talking. So if you think about let's say you had a torch, you're, in real life, you got a torch in your hand, propane torch or a lighter even. Let's say you got a lighter. Everybody knows what a lighter is. And you've got a piece of thick steel in your left hand and you got a piece of thin aluminum in your right hand. Now, if you're holding the thick steel and you run your lighter onto it, you can probably hold that thick steel for, a lot longer than you can the aluminum because the thick steel, you're just going to keep heating it and keep heating it and keep heating it. And it takes forever for that steel to heat up before it starts to burn your hand that you're holding it. Whereas if you take the lighter and you put it on the piece of aluminum, thin aluminum, that piece of thin aluminum is going to heat up right away. Right. So, just to try to put it into perspective. So, how much heat can it hold and how fast will it pick up the heat? So early game liquids that you're going to see a lot used is polluted water because it's easy to find and there's usually an abundant. And polluted water is actually surprisingly is a lot better than water itself. If I can click on it somehow, I'll show you. Or I'll just pull it up here. Water. I'd prefer to look at it on the other way. Let me see. Here's some. So whereas we just looked at the water, which was going to freeze at, it was 0.6 or something. The polluted water doesn't freeze till minus 20. And what that means is that you can let the water get really cold or colder, which will allow you to cool better, right? Because basically if you can't cool your liquid below, I don't know, minus or 10 or 15 degrees, because you have to remember that this thing always removes minus 14. So if the water in the pipe is 13 degrees and then you run it through here, it's going to drop by 14 degrees, which means that water is going to freeze and it's going to bust the pipe on you. So you're basically limited on to how cool the water can be in the pipe to begin with. And if that's the case, then it's going to take forever. You're trying to cool something that's hot using, warm water. So you end up in these problems. Anyways, polluted water can go down to minus 20. So that helps you. Your water could be 0 degrees and you could send it through again and actually get that water into the negatives. A specific heat capacity, pretty similar. Actually, it's exactly the same. And conductivity, the water seems to be a little bit more conductive, but 0.1 or whatever. So tomato. Anyhow, so that's good. Now, as you progress in the late game, there are things that are going to work much better, such as petroleum, right? Let's see if we can find petroleum here. Goes down to minus 57, right? And it's got a heat capacity of 1.76 compared to the 4. So not holding as much heat, but it's more conductive, right? So there's a trade-off. But the fact that it's more conductive and can I click on it again? The fact that it's more conductive and can go lower, you know, generally speaking, is good. And then, you know, as you progress, you can go all the way to crazy stuff like supercoolant and all sorts of different things. So you got to have a look to see about temperatures and kind of get familiar with what gases and liquids hold different temperatures so that you can use that moving forward to decide, you know, what's best for whatever the application is. All right. So what have I talked about? I've talked about material. We've talked about cooling liquids. So this here, the Aquatuner itself, you know, is just a standard building where you've got, you know, your white intake and your green outtake. Now, the thing that is really important is that you have to put a thermosensor right before the intake, because this is going to tell the machine whether it should continue to run or whether it should stop based off of the temperature of the water that's coming in, right? So if your water's still hot, you want it to keep going. If the water's too cold, you're saying, hey, stop. Don't waste power. You know, don't, you know, overcool my liquid so that the pipes burst. Take a break. And then the rest of this stuff that we build on it is literally just a bypass so that the water will continue to move while this thing is taking a break. Now, these things can be challenging to set up, and there's different ways to do it. You know, it can be a pain because you can design them in ways where the packets don't move and they'll start cycling back and forth. This is one way that I have luck with sometimes, where, you know, it comes out and then it just skips over here. Another way that I feel like is more reliable, see if I have an example of it here somewhere, is this here, where you actually, you know, the same thing on this side, except instead of popping this out this way, because that sometimes doesn't work perfectly, you come straight down and then you feed it in this way. But this pipe configuration is very important if you don't want to skip bubbles or packets of water or coolant, because if you skip packets, you're basically getting half the effective cooling, because you're going to have hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, and then it takes forever for it to go through. So that's how we're setting up these. And then the bridges, of course, are what forces the direction, because when it comes into the bridge, it's forced to come out the other side because it's like a one-way direction gate, right? Now, the automation here, which is Shift F2, is pretty simple. You're just, you know, connecting your Aquatuner to your thermosensor here. And then you're going to set your thermosensor for whatever signal, right? So mine is set right now to send a green signal. Obviously, green would turn it on. If the fluid coming in is above 5 degrees Celsius, it's a liquid pipe thermosensor, so it's sensing the fluids in the pipe, the temperatures of them. So that's pretty straightforward. Automation wire, again, doesn't matter really. Make it out of whatever you like. So that's how that works. Very simple. And we move on from this. Now, this container here, or this little room, I should say, is vacuumed out before when you put this all together. Now, I'm trying to remember, I've done this without vacuuming out the rooms, and it can work fine, assuming it's not a total mess of crap in here. You don't necessarily have to vacuum it out, but what I've learned as, you know, I collected hours over the years is that vacuuming out rooms, if you want to truly be able to seal a room so that you don't have to mess with it later, vacuuming it out is always best, because it really gives you that blank slate free of contaminants and will always make your life easier moving forward. So I highly recommend that you take the time to vacuum stuff out when you're doing builds. It can be a pain in the butt, I know, depending on how you're doing it. Two different ways, you know, you can create a quick liquid lock, do your work, what you need to do, and then seal it and then delete the liquid lock, or you can keep the liquid lock so that you can go in and out of the room later, or you can create a liquid lock, or you just, you know, fill it with blocks, fill the area with blocks, and then go in there after you seal off the outside and then delete all of the blocks, because when you put a block in, it deletes whatever is under the tile. So that's, you know, another straightforward way to do that. This here, the steam turbine, has these 5 ports here, right? And those are how it sucks. You can't block those. So you want to make sure those are clear. So getting them as close as you can in a little bit of, a little space as possible is ideal. And then here, the only other thing that needs to go in this room is a liquid vent. And the reason that we use this liquid vent here is because the steam turbine has to have the liquid vent, right? It's part of the building requirement because the building creates steam, creates water when it runs. And because this room is just a hot room sitting with, it's just a hot room with basically steam in it, we just, take the water that's coming out off of the steam turbine and we just throw it back in this room. So it just gets basically, gets hot and just becomes steam and, evaporates. So it's just a simple little loop that we create, make sure that we have steam and, gives us something to do with the water that's coming out of the turbine. Now, the next thing that we talked about, or what I talked about earlier, I should say, was this thing needing to stay cool. And I mentioned that we're going to use the cooling that we're already accomplishing, and we're just going to use that to cool the turbine. And that's a really simple thing. So that when your water initially, or whatever coolant you're using initially, comes out of the turbine here, we're just going to send it up. And we're just basically going to, run it behind the building. Conductive panels work great for this. They allow extreme temperature exchange with overlapping buildings. So that's great. If you didn't have a conductive panel, you could use, a radiant pipe, or you might even get away with just a normal, thermally reactive pipe. Obviously, radiant pipes are designed to allow temperature exchange, and they benefit based off of what material they're made out of. Liquid pipes have, temperature exchange too, just these normal ones. So different options, but you want to play it safe because you don't want to be messing with it later. So, you just go ahead and throw radiant pipe or conductive panel behind it. No big deal. And then it comes out. And then once it's out, you can continue with your loop to cool whatever you want to cool. So if we look at what's coming in and out, right? So I'm going in at -5 and I'm coming out at -6 because this thing is already so cold because it's been running for a while, right? So there's nothing, the system's not really running because everything's already been cooled. So the system is basically just idles because everything is just at the temperature that it's supposed to be, and away you go. The last thing to really discuss with these is the power into the room, because if you use some form of heavy watt plate, you're going to seep temperature, right? Which you don't want to do. You don't want to seep temperature in and out. So it's best to use conductive wire. It also matches, fairly well because conductive wire does 2K. You got 12 plus 850. So you're in that ballpark. That means you're going to want a transformer or something. Some people, this is technically a hot room, and so you'll see people like to, in other styles of hot rooms, people will put the transformers in here. I don't know how that really applies in this specific circumstance. It wouldn't really. So I guess your transformer is going to be sitting out, but correct me if I'm wrong. And then the reason that I have this set up like this is because these transformers operate on they're one-way power gates, basically, right? The power doesn't flow backwards. So these things require a lot of power to run, right? 1200 to run. And if you're doing a lot of cooling, it's running nonstop. But the turbine is also creating power. You're getting a plus 850. So you can look at, what your difference is for 350. But yeah, so you've got this, you put the one-way gate with a battery. So basically the power that it's creating right now is sitting here and just, basically being saved to be used by this thermal Aquatuner. But if for whatever reason it runs out of power, my system is designed to allow power in and to fill the battery, right? So basically the power that's sitting on this side of the transformer is trapped in here and is on reserve for this side, and it cannot flow backwards through the transformer onto the main thing. That's always been my understanding of how the transformers work. I don't believe I'm wrong on that, but I'm 90% sure that that's how that works, and that's how I've always used them, and that's how I've played, and it works, just fine for me. And then as well, if you look, so it'll say current load on this line right now is 1200, And then current load on this side is 1000. So that just kind of reinforces that whole point. Anyhow, all right, so what else do I need to cover here? So now let's have a look at how we're running this, or what we're doing with our cooling loop. So for me, when it comes to base cooling, I always find the easiest thing to do is I cool my main water supply, and and then I use that water supply to actively and passively cool the rest of my base. The reason that works is because you're using your main water to produce oxygen, probably. And you're using your main water to feed toilets, or to do your plants, right? And your plants will overheat if the water or if the rooms are too hot, et cetera, et cetera. So by using this chilled water everywhere in your base, you're, passively cooling all of the areas that the water goes to, right? So here you can see I'm feeding them with cool water. So the rooms are cooled, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a great thing. Same thing with the air, right? The water that's going into the air has been chilled. So hence we don't create, it helps with the air. Now the air is a little bit of a different thing because I think it comes out at a baseline temperature, and then it is affected by, the temperature, but it comes out at a temperature. Probably doesn't make any sense the way I'm saying it, but I think you always are getting, it comes out at a specific temperature, but you can make it hotter based off of using hot liquids. But anyways, that's neither here nor there for this video. 15. But you want to keep it cool. Keep the area cool. Put cold water in there. It's good practice. Now, the next thing that we can look at is why or how I'm cooling this thing. So you would want to use a radiant pipe because it does the most temperature transfer, right? And then obviously you want to use the best liquids, which we talked about. And then you would basically just weave this radiant pipe in and out of your water area to just try to transfer the temperature. Now, the shorter the cooling loop, the more it can cool, sort of, right? You want it big enough that you're picking up a lot of the heat, right? Because right now we're looking for heat transfer, and then we're bringing it into the tuner to destroy it. But in theory, the shorter the loop is, the faster the packets go through the Aquatuner. And because it always erases 14 degrees, if you had, let's say, hypothetically, just a small loop that was just going in a circle, you're just erasing 14, erasing 14, erasing 14 over and over and over very quickly. So you can drop that temperature of that packet very quickly because every couple seconds you're dropping minus 14, right? Whereas this packet that's coming out here will not receive any more cooling until it goes all the way around, right? And it's slowly going to pick it up. Now, the more it runs through, the more opportunity it has to pick up. The reason that we use metal is because metal has better heat transfer potential than the radiant pipes on their own. And then, yes, obviously the type of metal that you use affects how well the metal works. So let's see if I can show this so that it makes more sense. So if you looked at, let's say, cobalt, I guess it's not going to show it here. Well, can I get numbers? All right. So thermal conductivity, 100, right? Heat capacity, 0.4. Now, so you think of how conductive that is. That's extremely conductive, right? Now, a radiant pipe, let's say that's under it, does it say how conductive those are, or is it only based off of the liquid temperature? Let me see here. So they're supposed to allow, but it's based off of what they're made out of as well. Where do I see the numbers on this? I've looked at all this in the past. I know that this is valid. I don't know necessarily how to show it to you right now. But the point is that you're more conductive using the metal tiles because you're basically going to cool this whole thing, and it's going to help that spread, and then it's going to stay cold. And that's why when you look at this, like initially, especially when I was cooling this, this whole metal block was like solid blue while everything else goes. And even if you look at it right here, you can see like we're 3 degrees moving up to 5, 6. And then the metal tile, you can see here is, 1 degree, 3 degrees, whatever. So anyway, that's why this is why you see people use these metal tiles. And then the other thing that you'll see people do all the time, which is kind of not really related to the video, but they put doors, right? They put a door to stop the transfer, because you'll build the door, and when the door is open, the metal tiles aren't touching each other. So it'll, like, the temperature doesn't transfer through, and then you close the door, and then it will allow the temperature to transfer through. So that's another way you see people, transfer the cooling. All right, next, what have we not talked about yet? So we've looked at how this was put together, what we're using. We've looked at the temperature, how it's running through. Again, you don't have to do it this way. This is how I'm doing it. There's so many ways to skin cats in this game. Everybody has their own ways that they like to do stuff. And I see in the comments, sometimes people, they say, I do it this way, do it that way. And it's like, it's never going to be the same, and it's not fun if you do the same thing constantly, right? It's like, we don't want to eat the same cookies every day. We like to design new cookies, see what works. And different things have different applications. Every map is different. And so sometimes you have abundant resources. Sometimes you have so much water that you can, just turn the tap on forever. And sometimes you don't have any water. So you got to build things differently to accommodate that. So, don't get caught up in, trying to do what's perfect or what other people think's perfect or what they like to do. And experiment, design, and that's, what's fun about the game. All right, so the last thing, this was just water disinfection. I've covered this in other videos, but basically this is just a sealed room with gas, so we're disinfecting the water. Now, if I had a brain at the time, I would have put that outside the base, and technically I could have disinfected the water before I bring it in here so that this would be sitting clean. It doesn't make a difference. As you can see, actually there is some germs floating around-ish. But that would have been smarter on me at the time, in hindsight. And I'm too lazy to move it. I just don't care that much. So then after the passive cooling that we were talking about, which was the fact that we're feeding all these systems our cooled water, then you have active cooling. And I look at active cooling as basically a loop that you have specifically designed to try to pick up temperature. And my loop is doing both. It starts out passively cooling all these things because it's feeding them. And then it's also actively cooling because I also have a branch that goes nowhere, and I'm just running it in a loop around the outside of my base. So I'm basically just, adding a little bit of cooling. And then what I do is I use the water that's warmer and I send it off somewhere else to do something, kind of in another way to delete it. Now, if you had unlimited water and you didn't want to recool this water, you could run it all around, pick up all this heat, and then feed it to a plant that is willing to accept it. Or you could send it to outer space, which is basically, you picked up all the temperature and you got rid of it, right? It's not effective if you need to conserve resources, but in this map, I have more than enough water. I've got saltwater geysers. I got a cool slush. I got a polluted water vent. I've got steam vents. I've got salt water here somewhere that I haven't tapped into. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. So I have no water concerns. I could just, basically just waste it on nonstop and it wouldn't make a difference. Anyhow, but what I have set up specifically here is it runs all the way around. It picks up the temperature, and you can see it does a very good job because it's coming out here at, 9 degrees, 8 degrees, and it just slowly picks up. And then by the time it gets to the other side, it's 27 degrees. Now, what do I do with this water, you ask? Well, I send it all the way down here, and I've been starting to work on my oil supply. And I've been messing around, and the oil well needs water. And so I have to I'm sending some water down here. I don't think it takes polluted water, because if it did, then, I would been doing it wrong all this time. Regardless, so I send this water down here, but I don't want to drain my entire tank. Now, eventually I have to change this setup so that I'm getting my water to come in a little bit faster. I may end up putting another sieve, because the sieve is giving me 5 kilogram packets but I usually have 10 kilogram packets sitting up here. So I want to probably add another sieve, but then I deal with a renewable sand issue, which isn't really a big deal, but there's that. So anyways, so what I've done here is I basically put a hydro sensor, and we run this hydro sensor to this liquid shut off. And it basically says, hey man, if this, if I don't have any water above this height, right? So I just have it set to 0. So it goes green if it's above, but right now it's below. So it's sending a red. So it's closing this gate off. And it's basically saying, don't ditch any water in this base until this refills, because I've basically been using up so much water, that I'm burning through my water supply faster than I'm filtering in the replacement. And so I just leave this here to ensure that, I don't accidentally drain my whole tank. I was doing something, I can't remember what happened, but usually this sustains itself. I think it's because I ran out of sand for a while, or something happened. I can't remember. But anyhow, I'm running a deficit apparently, and so it's in the process of recuperating. Once I add this other one, hopefully I should be getting 10 kilograms of replacement, because you can see we're outputting 10 kilograms on the bottom here. So that's that. I'm trying to think, have I missed anything? Let's have a quick peek here. So vacuums, non-operable, sealed, power supply we talked about, conductive wire we talked about. Temperature, you can see no problems. Everything's cold. This room is hot. That's as intended. Full of steam. I do have a water packet, which wasn't there before. I think that if this started running more, that would convert and that water packet would no longer be there. So there's that. We've covered the liquid loop. We've covered the material inside the pipe. We've covered the type of pipe. We've covered the metal tiles. We've covered the distribution. We've covered ways to keep the loop running. We've covered the sensors, what the stuff's made out of, keeping the ports open. If you block some of the ports, you'll get reduced efficiency on this, and it won't delete the temperature quite as well. We've covered cooling the oxygen with it. The automation, there's only a little bit of automation. So I think that's basically it for looking at it from this side. Let's go ahead now and jump into the sandbox, and I will sort of put it all together. I'll build it all so that we can watch it, but I'm not going to, have dupes and shit doing it. So we'll be using some of the dev keys and stuff. So let's swap over to that. All right. So we're here in the sandbox mode. I really wanted to do this in a way where I could have the dupes actually do the work and go through the process. Problem is that it's just going to take too long. I started trying to set something up so that I could do it, but logistically having all like the resources readily accessible and having them eating and breathing and happy and sleeping and yada, 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 it just takes forever. So we're stuck like this. All right. So first we're going to imagine that we have a pool of water that needs to be cooled. So we will fill it with water, and the water, that temperature is going to be hot. Not too hot, but hot. We would say, okay, we want to set up a cooling loop because we want to cool this water because we're going to use this water for, our plants and stuff like I had just talked about. So what you're going to start with is using insulated tile, right? And then the steam turbine is 5 tiles, I believe. So we got 5 inputs. And then we're going to maybe want another space beside it, give or take. People make this in all sorts of, shapes and sizes to whatever floats their boat. I wonder if I can I'll make it like this, because if I make it right beside the water tank, we don't want to accidentally have heat transfer happening here. All right. So we tell our dupes to make it. We'll make it 6 tiles long. And we will make it make it like this. Nice and easy. So we'll have a vent, we'll have a turbine, and an Aquatuner. You may be able to make this more compact. I do believe you're going to need at least a 6 wide because you're coming in with the steam thing, but not that it really matters. And then, I think I got ahead of myself. So before we even do that, we would actually create a spot. So the way I do it is I would make a spot, basically a box beside it, right? and then I would come to the top of the box, and I basically come in and I'd make it like a triangle. So the way I do mine fast and dirty is I just do 3 down, 3 up, and then right from the cross, you just go up. That's like, you know, quick and dirty lock. And then you would leave that open. And then usually what I do is I'll take whatever liquid I have floating around. I just drop a vent in here, and I take any liquid. Oil, petroleum, polluted water, it don't matter really. Now we're gonna use one of these dev pumps as our water supply, right? And then that's like the fastest way you throw your lock together. And then while that's being made, I would basically come into my section and I would just plan, you know, how big it was supposed to be. So I would say, okay, I need 3 tiles, let's say here. Right, so let's say 4 tiles down. So we're using insulated pipes still. No, I said I only needed 3 tiles high, so stick with that. It doesn't matter. So I'd go like that, and I'd throw probably a ladder in here because I'm basically going to seal them both at the same time. Or sorry, vacuum them both out at the same time. So I would go like that. And as this is filling, which basically it already is, you can just cut that off. And now this is sealed. Now, so I was talking like the one way you see people do, right? They'll come in and they'll like fill it up and they'll clean it all. And then they come back, they do it all the way to the end, and then they delete them all. And then when they're done, they'll have a vacuum. Okay. The other way, obviously, that you're going to do it is the more traditional way, where you're going to throw a gas pump in and you're going to throw some power on it. And we're just going to get rid of all the gases that are inside it. 2 notes to take into consideration. One is that if you have only one spot open, you're going to potentially run into issues because sometimes stuff will get stuck, right? And then it's a pain to clear out. The other issue is your pump placement actually matters. Try to put your pump somewhere that it's going to get everything. I find personally like it's a pain. Like if there was like some, let's say, carbon dioxide or something in here, and I put my pump like up here, you know, it's to suck the carbon dioxide out of this corner through the dang straw hole all the way up over into here. It's a pain in the butt. So generally speaking, you know, I'll put it at the bottom, and I'll let that run through like that. So eventually this would empty, right? You could put, I don't know, you could put 2 in here. But I'm just going to skip. We're going to fast forward through this. Sorry, why did I get rid of that? So we're going to fast forward and we're going to say we waited for all this to happen. And then we're going to have do I do it like this? We're going to say that this space has been vacuumed out, right? So then you send your dupe in here and we're going to delete delete all the crap that we just made. So let's say you have this and you're all set up. You've got your vacuum now, right? Sequence of events matters because you're trying to get in and out of these places. So you're going to say, okay, we're going to take what am I looking for? A liquid pipe thermosensor. We're going to drop a sensor in here, and then you're going to go in, you're going to drop your thermal Aquatuner made out of steel. And you're going to put your intake, which is the white one, beside your sensor. And then you're going to run your automation, which is the equal sign on the keyboard. And you're going to run your line. I made this out of copper, and I made this out of copper. Again, here you can see that the overheating temperature, it's listing it as 325. And then it, melts at a crazy temperature. These guys here, you'll see melting 1,000, but no overheating listed. And then your automation wire, no overheating listed, melting at 1,000. So this sits like this. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put in our pump for our steam turbine, which is going to go like this. So here you'll see no overheating temperature listed, melting point 1,000. So I don't think you need to worry about your material stuff for this one. I don't usually. And then here I'll run an insulated pipe. Doesn't really matter. So we're just going to click that into here. And that's basically it. And then I would come in here and I would have, my guys deconstruct this. Now you're going to have them do like the bottom 2 tiles. And then you're going to work your way up the ladder. You may have issues with pieces of crap falling on the floor here, right? you know, if it's a problem and if it drives you nuts, you could build a tile here and destroy a tile and suck sideways, or you could build a separate liquid lock over here, right? So that you can basically, you know, get in on the side of these things however you wanted to do it, right? But for all purposes, it doesn't really matter if it's there. Sometimes these things bother me, sometimes they don't. Anyways, you're gonna work your way back up into here. Oh, I almost forgot, actually. You don't want to forget your plumbing. So I would run insulated pipe out of here and then up into a section that you can reach it. Now, because when you can't go back into these rooms, generally what I do is I'll try to like think about my pipes, because what you can do is you can use the cut tool and the build tool, right? So if you have a pipe, if you can access outside the room, if you have this, you don't have to come in to cut the pipe, and you don't need a dupe to do it. Furthermore, if you click on the specific pipe, liquid pipe, and then you hit build, you can connect it, and you don't need a dupe to do that. Now, the reason why I say you use the same material, because if you don't, then the dupe will try to come here and swap the material of the pipe, and that's when you bust the pipe open and it becomes a problem. But as long as you click on the pipe and then you hit B to copy the same material, you can just do this all the time. So if ever you need to feed stuff or you run into problems, you can access your lines. So always, when you're building stuff, keep that in mind. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be looking at, let's say, oh, my bad, clicking like crazy here. Plumbing is 5. We're going to insulated, so run, I don't know, an insulated here maybe. And then we're going to look at our loop, which is the white on white. So we run the white intake beside the white intake on this, right? Something like that. And then we'll take another insulated pipe and we'll connect those. And that's basically it. So when the water comes in here, it gets checked for temperature. If the temperature is too hot, when it hits this white tile, it gets sucked in through the machine. If the temperature is too cold, the machine is disabled. So when it hits the white tile, it doesn't get sucked in. It is forced here, and then it gets sucked into the loop, which gets spit out over on that side. So that's it for this room. Unless I'm forgetting something again, but I'm sure I'll remember in a minute. Then when you get up here, I actually messed this up because we won't be able to get in and out of the room. But that's not the end of the world. We can fix this. What we could do is we could take here. So let's say you would come in here. Let's say you deconstruct that block. You maintain your vacuum. And then you could use that as like a step. Or you could like just continue to do it so that you're just like stepping it, because you're going to have to walk down here anyhow with your guy. So steam turbine. Again, we said material didn't really matter. We click this guy in here. Oh, I forgot to put the power in. Shite. Don't forget to do this stuff. It's important. All right. You're still in the room and you're putting power. However you like it. It really doesn't matter. Actually, probably better to go straight down so you can access the line, just like I was talking about. So you can cut it and then run it up the side so that you can always have access, because you're going to have access inside your water tank, right? So if you wanted to access this line, you could come up underneath this room and you could connect here. You wouldn't be able to connect onto that spot, but you could connect here and then you could be in the water. You could run and connect into that line. Let's see how many more things I forget. Power, steam turbine. We would not have this in. We would need to be walking in and out. And then power. Okay. And then let's say you run your steam turbine. Let's say here is fine. Materials didn't matter, we said. And then we'll connect our power so we don't forget. And then we're going to finish with our connecting the plumbing. And we'll continue with a insulated pipe. But I'm going to connect it like this. And the reason I'm going to connect it like this is because I'm going to put a bottle drainer on this thing to prime my system. And to prime the system is because we're going to add a little bit of water into here just so that we can kickstart the steam process, right? The other issue here is my, heck is it called? It's going to be my conductive thing. We might have to move that in a minute. Anyways, so because we're going to have a conductive panel and then we're going to have to get over top of all that stuff. So, I mean, you know, you could maneuver this around a little bit. It's not the end of the world. Actually, what you could do is you could just not connect it early. So you could just like actually just not connect this early if you wanted to until you fill it. So you could run it like this, and then you're going to take your plumbing. So we've got this thing, and what this is made out of, I mean, you know, make it out of, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but make it out of something that's, you know, that's thermally reactive, or that, you know, helps spread temperature a little bit. We're going to stick with our insulated pipe, if I can click my buttons properly, because we've got hot water, or, you know, basically fluids, or cool fluids at this point, sorry, because it's come out of the Aquatuner. So we don't want to lose the cool of them. We don't want to lose their chill factor. Anyways, let's say you come over here, and this part, you know, really doesn't matter. You can decide how you want to do it. You could, you're going to stick with the insulated pipe. You could come down here, and I mean, you could bridge over it literally, you know, right here. You could bridge over it here. Might be better since it's in the insulated tile. Might not be a big deal. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The point is you're just trying to get the water out, or the coolant, that whatever coolant you're using, out to the other side. And, you know, that works for that. So then when you get to the other side, you're in your water. And this is where you're going to start connecting your cool based, you know, your radiant piping, whatever you're using with your most thermally reactive stuff. Aluminum is one of the better ones. You know, some of this stuff some of these materials you'll like just never really ever deal with, depending if you go like real late game. But aluminum's a good one, cobalt, shit like that. So yeah, so this is all set. And remember, we're going to have access on this side, right? Because this is our water tank. So this doesn't really matter. We will have a ladder in here or whatever. You will be completely able to do whatever you like in this room. And so the next thing we need to do is we need to put some water in here, right? So we're going to use this to fill the water. Now, obviously we know how to use this thing. You click on it, you put your water in here. It's got to be water. You want clean water. This is still in a vacuum. Now for the purpose of this, I'm going to brush a little bit of water down. Doesn't have to be a lot of water. You know, 1,000, you could run like 300, I don't know, 400. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. You want to have a little bit, but at the end of the day, even if this is like stays a layer of water, there will always be steam here. I mean, it's not perfect, but like you just run a line of water here, you know, run some water, fill it up so that the tile's got a bit, and you leave it at that. That's good. If ever you want, you can add water again later. Doesn't matter. And this is obviously putting water in here, right? So then we're going to deconstruct, this line here. We're going to deconstruct this pump. Actually, do we need to? I don't even think we necessarily need to. I don't know if it works still when it's like this, but yeah, maybe it works just like that. Maybe leave that pump right in there. There you go. Beauty. I'm not sure how I usually do it. I don't remember. I'm kind of just winging this on the fly. I always change up what I'm doing based from 1 minute to the next. But yeah, so you have this. So point is, you know, you're still following me hopefully, but we're cooling, we're coming in, we're cooling this thing, and then everything is just to come back into a loop. This loop is however you want it to be. It can be, you know, you could be going like, you know, pipe spaghetti. You're dumping all this temperature. Oops, my bad. You know, it could be running all the way across, all the way to the end, and then it comes back in and it feeds in here. So that can work. You could do any of that. Or like you saw in my example earlier, you could come in here and you could just have your radiant, and you can run your radiant on the bottom. And then if you can leave it like this if you want, or you could use some metal tiles, and then you would, you know, build your bottom level out first. And then after that one was built, you would have them put on the second layer. Bada bing, bada boom. So if we remember our temperature, right? So we're still hot in here. So that's basically our loop in a nutshell. We've got water in here. This is still vacuumed. This is, you know, running like this. Everything's still good to go. The next thing that we're going to look at is we're going to say, okay, we've got to prime this line because we have to fill this line with coolant, with whatever our coolant is going to be. Now, there's a bunch of different ways we can do this. One is we can use the same bottle drainer. We can build a bottle drainer right here. And remember, we can still, hey, where's my water coming from? Damn it. Oh, it's because I overfilled this. Well, I didn't, but when it filled, it did. So yeah, so you could use this and you could tell it to put, you know, whatever liquid you might be wanting to pump into it. The other thing that I usually do is I just pump it in from, you know, wherever I've already got it. So I could, you know, I would literally just run another line here. And let's say if I wasn't using this thing, I would just tie the line in here. And then, yeah, but you could run the line anywhere as long as you just have to make sure you have access. I mean, if you have access to the side, you could run it into the side here. You could run it in down here. You can run it in anywhere. And then let's say we have petroleum, or we'll use polluted water since that's a thing that people like to use. We change that to polluted water. Push this out. And let's say we're pumping out polluted water into our system, except we got this. I don't want that. Right, so this is going to go in. So we're feeding the line one way or another, bottle drainer or whatever you like. And then, oh, why are we not going here? In, out, in, out, in, out. What's the problem here? All right, I'm having a brain fart here. Oh, okay, I'm an idiot. That's why. It's right here. My bad. All right, so everything was fine. We will continue as we were. And if everything's working properly, this should fill full packets and it should go around. All right, so she's full. Let's deconstruct those. And we're a little bit too full, maybe. 1, 2, 3 out. 3 out works. There you go. And you just have your dupe, right? Your dupe has tidying skill or whatever. And he can empty or plumber, whatever he needs, right? So you tell him empty 3, whatever. And this is what you're looking to see. That's it. And we come back here. Could get rid of all that. Now, there's ways to do this without dumping all your water all over, which I could have shown. But the other issue with that is that's polluted oxygen. So that's a big F up on my part here. For my example, polluted oxygen off gases, or sorry, polluted water off gases, polluted oxygen. So when you're taking the pipe out, don't do that. Or you'll end up having to, you know, to redo that. Because now I've just killed our vacuum in the top, which is exactly not what we wanted. And I've put polluted oxygen in this. So actually our whole vent is off-gassing, which is not good. But I will say in my defense, technically this room doesn't need to be a vacuum, right? This can run just fine if this is not in a vacuum. I like to do it, but you don't need to. It will still get cooled from whatever. Anyhow. Let's move forward so I don't spend all day explaining this. So now let's say power. So I don't have any power source, obviously, as it's not a real colony. So we're going to put this fake power thing in. And then we will put a transformer. But this one won't work. This one only lets through 1,000. Now, remember, keeping in mind that eventually this is going to be powering itself, right? So it can work just fine. I mean, I guess in theory, right? Because you don't need 1,000 to ever come through, right? You're going to kickstart the system. I get rid of this dang thing off my floor here. And I'll get rid of this stuff here too. So it's struggling right now. And it's, you know, because I've got the small transformer. But all right, let's just scrap that. Let's just say that you decide to put the big transformer instead. I'm on the map that I'm showing you. When the example I showed you a minute ago, I'm pretty sure I was just using the small transformer because it does work. It'll balance itself or figure out what it is. I think because eventually, you know, this should be already picking up hot temperatures, right? So this water in here is already 80 degrees. So like the system should kickstart quickly. And once it gets going, it would work, you know? So anyhow, let's have a look here. So here we go. This is running. Anyhow, so let's assume this was still a vacuum. You could come in here and you could seal it off. Right? You could seal that off again, and you could leave this here. It really doesn't matter. Or you could have gotten rid of this thing. Doesn't matter. So basically, it sits like that. And you sit here and you watch it work its magic. Temperature-wise, right now we're gonna set this. So we know our polluted water is good till minus 20, right? So I kind of, you know, I like edge a bit. So, you know, you could run it to like, I don't know, 5 maybe. And then, you know, it'll hit 5. It'll go through 1 more. And then it'll put you, you know, at around minus 10. I mean, you could set it to 0, You know, honestly, you could set it to 0. I like it a little bit cooler because it just means that I'm going to be able to spread it farther, right? And now I'm going to let this run so that we can watch the magic here. Just make sure I'm not forgetting anything. This thing is powered. But eventually you don't need this much, like you're going to be using its own power. And this is part of the reason why I put the battery, is so that, you know, you have that buffer so that when it's creating power. Oh, is this thing breaking? Because that little thing is making so much power. There we go. Oh, or not. It's not a little pipe here. There we go. Anyways, eventually this is going to be producing power, right? And so you're going to use that 850 to help for this. Now, if everything's cold and, you know, well, in theory, it wouldn't be running at that point. So you wouldn't necessarily have any more power to waste. But regardless, that's a good way to do it. To get it started, you know, you may want to use a bigger one. Maybe you're impatient, or you're not impatient, but, you know, maybe you have the means to and you want to do it that way. It doesn't matter. So this is going to keep running through here. So she comes in. I feel like we could have put some more packs in here, actually. I got an empty spot here. Not the end of the world, though. It's still going to do what it's supposed to do. It's going in 70. It's coming out 57. And we got to remember that right now it's picking up all the heat in this room, right? So we are slowly lowering the temperature of everything. So this metal tile, we can see it's dropping. 73, 74. And this was pretty hot. I don't remember what I put it in at. 90 maybe? And now I'm going to let this cool so that you guys can see. It has a faster mode, but I feel like it's still not that fast. But anyways, there we go. It's a little faster. I'm going to let this cool, and I'll show you this one in a vacuum. And then I'll show it to you, you know, not in a vacuum, and you'll see it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. You could have, you know, put your liquid lock down here. You know, it makes it easier maybe if you want to pick up the crap on the ground. You could have treated this as the only vacuum that you needed. Well, it's definitely going faster. Kind of hard to look at. Let's zoom out for a minute. This is going to take a while. It's a big body of water. Thanks for watching. If you're still here, it's been a long video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I'll see you in the next video.